It's a big, dangerous galaxy out there in Starfield, and one of the easiest ways to get yourself killed is by getting yourself mixed up in a dogfight without a reliable ship. Seriously, space combat accounts for some of the deadliest and most difficult encounters that this massive RPG throws at you. To avoid having your space exploration grind to an early halt, you'll need to upgrade your ship. So here's everything you need to know about building starships in Starfield. Before you even begin to think about making any major modifications to your starship, you're going to need a sizable pile of credits to draw from. We recommend stockpiling at least 60,000 credits if you're hoping to make major changes to an existing ship, like the one you get for free right after the game's intro, the Frontier. But if you're like us and demand as much storage and fancy accessories as possible, you should probably have much more than that. For reference, we sunk over 300,000 credits into one of our high-end ships early in our adventure. So yeah, space travel is pretty expensive as it turns out. Now we know why poor Han Solo resorted to hauling those Wrath Tars.
I got a bad feeling about this.
If you want to know how to make money fast, check out our guide that focuses on how to do just that. To repair or improve existing starships, or purchase new starhoppers altogether, you'll need to find a spaceport. Luckily, these are all over the place. Whenever you touch down on a populated area like New Atlantis on Jemison, Cydonia on Mars, or Aquila City on Aquila, just look around near your ship's landing pad and you'll find a place to buy, sell, and upgrade ships.
Sure, how about it?
Some can be a bit easy to miss or are a little hidden, like the Stroud storefront on Neon. But pretty much every major city or settlement will have something to help you with your ship, and they're always at least somewhat close to a landing zone.
Anything I can help you with?
One of the fastest and most straightforward ways to improve your ship is to merely upgrade its existing modules instead of entering the builder and getting your hands dirty. To do so, approach any spaceport vendor and select the option to view and modify your ship. Then select the Upgrade Ship option in the bottom right-hand corner. This will open a menu that allows you to simply scroll through each of your ship's components and swap them out with better versions. Doing so will grant modest improvements, but will also keep costs under control and avoid the headache that is learning the ship builder. However, improving your ship this way also prevents you from taking your ship to the next level, and you're likely to encounter extreme difficulty in larger space battles. If you want to not just improve your ship's existing components, but add more stuff to it, then you'll need to enter the ship builder instead. That's where things get a lot more involved and expensive. Alright, well, if you've made it this far, then you've decided you want to become a proper starship mechanic. And fair warning, learning the ropes here can be very, very confusing at first, so don't expect to be able to slap on a better engine and go about your day. We've spent hours tinkering, optimizing, and color-coding our starships, and you should prepare yourself for that kind of commitment before you even enter the shipbuilder. With that warning out of the way, let's dive in. To enter the shipbuilder, approach a spaceport vendor and select the View and Modify option like before, except this time, when you get to the ship selector, you're going to want to pick the Ship Builder option at the bottom right-hand corner of the screen. This will take you to a new view of your ship where you'll have full control over all aspects of your vessel, including the ability to remove parts, add new ones, and make cosmetic changes like giving pieces a fresh coat of paint. The reason this is so different from just upgrading your ship is that instead of swapping out your ship's engine for a more powerful one, you can do crazy stuff like add a second engine, or 6 engines if you're feeling spicy. To check out the stats of any piece of your ship, just scroll over it. And to make changes to that piece, like moving it somewhere else or deleting it, you can tap the Edit button. To browse the spaceport's offerings of new parts that can be added to your ship, you'll want to scroll to an empty space in the editor and select the Add option that becomes available. There's also a color button that pops up when you hover over any part in the builder, which allows you to make cosmetic changes free of charge. Starship components in Starfield are divided into 14 categories, each with their own purposes and limitations. Bays. These are landing ramps you'll use to exit and board your ship when it's landed on solid ground. Most spaceport vendors will offer a few different kinds, like one that snaps onto the side of your ship versus the front. When putting a bay on your ship, you'll need to ensure it's at the lowest point on the vessel so that the ramp can touch the ground when you land, so don't try to put anything below it or you'll get an error. Also, I don't know why you'd ever try it, but you aren't allowed to have more than one bay on your ship. Cargo. These are used to increase the storage capacity on your vessel, which you can access while aboard your ship by entering your inventory and pressing the button to tab over to the ship's cargo. Cargo bays are gaudy attachments that connect to the sides of any HAB module, which we'll discuss later, and they're completely invaluable in a game where you'll be collecting lots of loot and encumbrance is very limited. You can add as many cargo modules as you want, but doing so will make your ship very bulky, and you're likely to get an error telling you that you need to add more engines and gears to offset that increased weight, which we'll go over shortly as well. Also, if you're interested in doing a bit of smuggling and want to avoid those pesky government scanners, you can find some spaceport vendors who will offer shielded cargo. These are a special kind of cargo hold that can allow illegal items to avoid the notice of the authorities. Most vendors don't sell these though, so you'll need to find an unscrupulous soul willing to help you out.
All right.
One such greasy individual can be found in the Parima system, located to the east of Alpha Centauri on the star map. Look for a planet called Parima 3, land at the settlement of Red Mile, and go inside the building there to find a guy who looks exactly like Carl from Aqua Teen Hunger Force. His name is Lon. We call him Shady Lon, and he'll hook you right up.
Let's get this over with.
Cockpits. These are where you'll pilot your ship. In addition to the aesthetic differences, some cockpits will offer more cargo storage and more seats for additional crewmates to help you pilot your ship. Many cockpits also have one or more mounting sockets for weapons or equipment to be snapped onto, so you'll want to consider the number of mountable sockets in your decision as well. Dockers. Similar to bays, dockers allow you to get on and off your ship, except instead of being used on the ground, dockers allow you to connect to other ships and space stations via an airlock. The main restriction you'll have to keep in mind with dockers is that, in order for them to be usable, they have to be at the outermost point of whichever direction the docker is facing. So if your docker is on top of your ship, no other part can stick out higher than that point. Why? Because otherwise your ship would crash into whatever it is you're trying to dock with, and that's no good. Luckily, vendors sell dockers of all kinds of orientations, so if you don't like having it on the roof of your vessel like the starting one has, you can swap it for a docker on the side, for example. Also, just like bays, you can only have one docker per ship, though again, there's no reason you'd ever want more than one. Engines. These increase your ship's ability to go faster and carry more weight. Not only can you buy powerful engines, but you can add as many as your ship can power, allowing you to gain crazy speed and deal with increasingly heavy starships. Engines come in all kinds of orientations, like ones that can be slapped onto the side of your ship or tagged onto the back. So experiment as you try to find spots to shove as many of these things in as your heart desires. A common error you'll see when adding things to your ship is that your ship is too heavy to fly or has so much mass it loses maneuverability. You can combat both of these things by simply adding more powerful and more numerous engines, so long as you've got a reactor with enough juice to power them. Fuel tanks. These power your ship's grav drive and allow you to make grav jumps over greater distances without having to make pit stops. You can only have one equipped on your ship at a time, so we recommend just grabbing the biggest one you can find and slapping it onto any available spot. Not a whole lot else to this one. Gear. These are landing gears that allow your ship to touch down on solid ground. The size and weight of your vehicle, tracked by the mass stat on the shipbuilder menu, determines how many of these gears you'll need to have equipped, with an error popping up to notify you when you need to add more. Like bays, gears need to be at the lowest point of your ship so they can touch the ground. But aside from that, there aren't any rules for where you put them. They just need to be there and in great enough numbers to support your vessel's weight. Grav drives. This is the piece of equipment that allows your starship to jump from star system to star system, and the better the drive, the farther you can go in a single jump, so long as you've got a fuel tank big enough to get you there. You can only have one of these bad boys, so choose wisely. Another consideration to think about is the grav drive's health, which determines how much damage it can take in combat before becoming disabled, leaving you unable to escape combat.
Grav drive offline. We're not jumping out.
Habs. These are the core modules of your starship, large rooms that can be snapped onto your ship to house companions, workbenches, and more. They also add nodes on all of their surfaces that allow you to add other things to your ship. For example, cargo modules need to have one such node to snap onto, and adding a large hab is a great way to gain access to many of those. If you're starting to build a starship from scratch, the layout of your habs is likely the first thing you'll want to consider, as it sets a foundation for all the other pieces of your starship to be built upon. Keep in mind, though, that the nodes generated on the sides of a hab are for larger pieces of equipment only. For smaller stuff like weapons, you'll need a structure like a weapon rack, which weapons can then be snapped onto. Reactors. This is the piece of equipment that powers every other electrical component on your vessel. You can only have one per starship, so the key here is to get as much juice out of this thing as possible by picking one with a high power generated stat, since many other essential components like engines require lots of power to operate. Other considerations for this vital component include health, which will determine how many hits this thing can take before you're left without power, repair rate, which determines how quickly it'll come back online when knocked out, and crew capacity, which determines how many crewmates can be assigned to this unit. Shields. This piece of equipment will determine how many hits you can take before your hull and core systems of your ship start taking damage directly. Needless to say, this is a super important part of your ship, and you can only have one equipped. Max health and regen rate are going to be the most important aspects to consider. Structural. These are mostly cosmetic pieces of hull that can be added to most parts of any ship. While it isn't necessary to have any of these at all, I recommend not overlooking them, since they can serve as protection to your ship's more delicate components like your reactor, for example, and many of them also generate minor nodes for attachments, like weapons, to be attached to. Weapons. These are exactly what you think they are. Many different kinds of weapons are available, like lasers that excel at taking down shields, cannons that are great for piercing through metal, and missiles that do heavy damage all around, but tend to come in limited supply with longer times between being replenished. To attach a weapon to your ship, you'll need a place to mount it, and there's a few ways to do that. You can use a cockpit or structure that has a node available for you to attach something. You'll need to experiment to see which generate sockets, or you can grab a weapon mount from the structure tab and slap those onto any available part of your ship, which gives you space for 2 weapons to be mounted. We recommend the latter method, as it's a great way to gain ample space for firepower without adding a ton of bulk to your vessel. The only limitation with weapons is that you only have 3 weapon slots, which are used to map those weapons to the button you'll use to fire it. For this reason, you cannot have more than 3 different types of weapons equipped on one starship at the same time. If you add a weapon that isn't assigned to one of the 3 weapon spots, you'll get an error notification that will make you fix it before you can save changes. That said, just because you only have 3 weapon slots doesn't mean you can only have 3 guns on your ship. Quite the opposite. You can equip as many copies of the same type of weapon as you want. So if, like us, you find a laser that you like, there's nothing preventing you from slapping 5 copies of it onto your ship for maximum damage. Equipment. Finally, without going into spoilers, certain unique pieces of equipment may become available to you as you adventure. These might do something like protect you from electrical damage or reduce the amount of time it takes to lock onto enemy ships. These are similar to weapons in that you'll need a minor node, usually generated by a cockpit or a structure, to snap these onto. 14 different components to consider, each with their own restrictions and orientations, is a lot to take in. But once you understand the purpose of each piece, it becomes a lot easier to imagine how they'll all come together to create something beautiful. Play around and take things one step at a time, and you'll be building masterpieces in no time. As you build and upgrade your starships, you're bound to notice that certain pieces are locked for you. That's because many parts require special unlocks before they can be accessed. When you first start your adventure, you'll only have access to Class A components, with all the best stuff locked off. And if you try to apply one of these to your vessel, you'll get an error that tells you to buzz off. The two things you'll need to upgrade if you want to level up your game are your piloting skill, which unlocks access to Class B and Class C parts at ranks 3 and 4 of that skill respectively, and Starship design, which gives you access to more powerful components at every additional rank. Unlocking all of these is likely to take a while though, and that's okay. There are plenty of awesome standard Class A stuff for you to use in the meantime, and even without the fancy stuff, you can make an incredibly powerful starship. And there you have it. Now you know everything you'll need to build your very own starship. For more, check out our guides on starting backgrounds and traits and how to build an outpost. And for everything else, keep brushing up on your rocket science with IGN.